Now this test didn't begin as a 1,000-round torture test or longevity test or endurance test or anything like that. I mean, to be honest, I generally don't like running my handguns with optics because I have so many hours and so many hundreds of thousands of rounds through pistols set up with just standard iron sights that I'm just not as comfortable with an optics equipped pistol. So I decided to put a few hundred rounds through my Canik TP9SFX before doing a proper review of the gun, kind of a familiarization period. But something unexpected happened during this familiarization. I forgot how much that I liked shooting TP9 pistols, and since I already had 7 magazines on hand for the gun, I ended up blowing through nearly 800 rounds of Winchester's steel-cased, USA-forged 115 grain full metal jacket 9mm ammunition. Now, I don't normally do such an in-depth familiarization period on any gun, but I was basically trying to burn up the ammo off camera because I had accidentally left about a case of the stuff in the back of a buddy's pickup truck for about a month and a half, exposed to the elements of South Carolina, and because of this, the steel casing showed a great deal of corrosion. Now, because of the corrosion, I was worried that the primers might not be all that reliable. I figured, what the hell, I'll burn up a few boxes of this ammo and familiarize myself with the TP9SFX before filming a proper review. And once I realized I'd already put 800 rounds through the gun, I decided to throw 2 more 100 round boxes through it to even the number out to 1,000 rounds. So, how did the Turkish blaster fare after firing a full case of ammo through it in just over an hour? Let's find out. Enter the Canik TP9SFX, optics-ready handgun, imported by Century Arms. The Canik TP9SFX is a locked breech, striker-fired, semi-automatic pistol chambered in 9mm parabellum. The design uses a steel slide and barrel atop a high-impact polymer frame. Like all TP9 pistols, the TP9SFX feeds from stagger-columned box-type magazines. The SFX, unlike the regular models, ships with 2 20-round magazines instead of 18 rounds. And truthfully, these 20-round mags are simply the 18-round regular mags that ship with TP9s, but with a +2 base plate finished in the same titanium gray color as the slide. This means that the SFX can utilize magazines from any other TP9 pistol, and if shooters still find themselves short of magazines, they can actually modify Beretta 92 magazines to fit. And what's cool is doing so does not affect their ability to function with the Beretta. Now, the SFX model differentiates itself from previous TP9s in several ways, the most obvious of which is the extended ported slide and the longer 5.2-inch barrel. The additional barrel length is useful for extending the effective range of the pistol by increasing the muzzle velocity, though the increased sight radius may be just as beneficial as any moderate gains to velocity. The slide features a bright red fiber optic front sight post and a blacked out steel notch rear sight made by Warren Tactical, both of which are dovetailed into the slide and are thus adjustable for windage. Now, this is a great setup for quick shooting since the bright red post contrasts very well against the matte black rear notch, basically forcing the shooter to focus their eye immediately on the front sight post. Though it's what's underneath that rear sight that really separates the newest TP9 from the rest, a sight plate. The TP9SFX ships with 4 sight plates that allow shooters to attach most of the more popular miniature reflex sights on the market. Each of these 4 plates features a threaded lateral hole that runs across the plate. This is so shooters can install the included charging handle on either side to facilitate easier reloading and easier manipulation when an optic is attached. More than that, the TP9SFX ships with a ton of features that are normally reserved for much more expensive competition-ready guns. For instance, the SFX ships with 3 interchangeable magazine release buttons, a small, medium, and large. This is so that even smaller-handed shooters can set the pistol up to be able to drop their empty magazines without shifting the firing hand's grip. And speaking of grip, the Canik features 2 interchangeable back straps, so shooters can either reduce or increase the size of the grip to better fit their hands. Now, both the front and back straps of this grip feature molded raised checkering to prevent slipping, and the side panels are molded in a stippling-like pattern for the same reason. Also, the TP9SFX features an enlarged slide release that gives the shooter's thumb extra leverage and additional purchase on the lever. This makes both dropping the slide and locking it open much easier. The gray titanium-colored slide features serrations at both the back and the front, the latter being useful for shooters running an optic that might otherwise block access to the rear serrations. For the review, I decided to attach a Trijicon RMR to the number 2 sight plate, since it's one of the most popular models on the market from a company with a well-established history of building quality products. After the first 200 rounds, I noticed that the side plate was beginning to work itself loose from the slide, but the Trijicon RMR was still rock solid. This is presumably because Trijicon's RMR features blue thread adhesive on its mounting screws. So I took some blue Loctite I had on hand and applied a single drop to both plate screws on the TP9SFX. After allowing the screws to sit for a few minutes, the plate encountered no issues afterwards and remained rock solid for the rest of the test. Now, one note of caution, the screws themselves aren't made of very hard steel, but the slide they thread into obviously is. So don't over tighten with an Allen key or you will very likely strip them, as I nearly did. All right, now that we've gone over all the various features of the TP9, let's talk about how it performed during its impromptu stress test. Now, during the course of fire, 9 magazines were loaded to capacity and fired through the Canik at steel targets from both shootsteel.com and Action Target, from around 10 yards away. I wasn't mag dumping rounds at them, but I was firing as fast as I could put the RMR's 6 MOA dot back on target. Now, Kay was actually behind the firing line reloading mags for me while I was doing this, so I was realistically touching off 12 magazines at a time before stopping to fill them all back up. Now, these mags hold between 18 and 20 rounds each, but we'll just assume, for simplicity's sake, that they were all low capacity, and we'll factor in a few minutes for 2 people to top off magazines, and say that I was essentially firing strings of about 216 to 220 rounds every 10 minutes. Now, at this pace, the TP9SFX gets very hot, and the steel controls conduct enough heat that they're uncomfortable to touch. But other than this discomfort, there were no adverse side effects from letting the gun heat up that much. And interestingly enough, the gun really didn't get that dirty after 1,000 rounds. Take a look. Now, notice there is some carbon fouling on the gun, but what's interesting is I didn't apply any oil or cleaning solution. I left the factory anti-rust solution on the gun that it shipped with. And while it's not pretty, it's not that bad either. Now, note that during these strings, I saw no degradation in accuracy or reliability, and the slide never got hot enough to produce enough mirage to render the RMR's dot useless. Now, in terms of accuracy, the new Canik was very solid, with most of its 115 grain rounds producing groups around 2.9 to 3 inches at 25 feet from a bench. And interestingly enough, after the first 1,000 rounds, the groupings actually seemed to shrink, though this is probably a combination of the trigger lightening up with use and my own proficiency with the gun increasing. In a nutshell, the Canik TP9SFX is a reliable, accurate, competition-ready pistol that feeds from capacious magazines. And while that's more than enough to warrant buying one, the fact that it retails for only $549 makes the new Canik a steal. Now, I'm sure the majority of you guys are going to call me a shill in the comments section, and for good reason. There's no way that a gun for like $600 could be on par with $1,000 race guns, right? Well, this is not an STI. It doesn't have a quarter-pound trigger and the capability of putting 1,000 rounds into a nickel-sized group at like 10 yards, but it's still an amazing, amazing deal and a phenomenal choice for competitive shooters of basically all skill levels, except for like God tier, guys like Jerry Micklick and whatnot. And even that, I'm sure he could still work miracles with a pistol. It's a very affordable pistol that ships with everything a competitor or a shooter needs to run the gun as either a competitive pistol, home defense pistol, or just like a fun plinking gun at the range. I mean, overall, the Canik TP9 brings a feature-loaded $1,000 quality pistol to market at a bare-bones entry-level price. Shooters looking to get into either competitive pistol shooting, 3-gun, or hell, just wanted a dependable, reliable, accurate handgun for any purpose, but don't necessarily want to drop $1,000 on a gun and its magazines, should save themselves a little trouble and pick up a Canik TP9. Now, I normally close these reviews with some sort of caveat and say, the gun is great except for X, Y, Z, whatever that happens to be, right? But with the Canik, the only thing I can even nitpick on is its lack of a threaded barrel. And truthfully, given the rising popularity of the Canik TP9, I have to assume that an entrepreneuring individual or company will remedy that one soon enough. Thanks, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more burst reviews.